So, as I said, Jal stopped at a point where Arihant had reached the peak of physical perfection. He had, when he emerged from this whole Kayakalp experience, he's like a young god. He's like, a golden warrior, which anybody would be in awe of, and that's how he comes across towards in the last couple of chapters of the book, and you wonder where he'll go from there. So when Mahakal starts, that is the place we are at, because he's this almost perfect creature, and he's very he's still very charming, very lovable, but he's getting cocky, because suddenly he finds that, okay, even earlier he was something very different. He stood out wherever he was, but now after the Kayakalp, after the acquisition of the Siddhis, he's unstoppable. So he's like, I can do anything. I can go through ranks of anything that is thrown at me, whether it is the serpents of Oshij or it's the Danavas who attack him at one place, whatever. So, and he begins to actually believe that now I'm ready to take on the god. What more can I learn? It's basically, he stops feeling a need for further growth, further development. And that's where, the whole problem comes. He is now, he's now 18 plus, and he's a young man, very, very amazing young man, and he's met, a whole lot of other people who sort of add to his aura, who are sort of, following him, growing with him, and these are very deep bonds that he's formed with people around him. He falls in love in Vikral. And he thinks, wow, life is perfect. What more do I need to do? What more do I need to be? And then Vikral was a kind of, the idea was to break down this wall that he's built around himself, because unless you admit that you need to grow, you will not grow. And he's obviously nowhere near the level at which he's required to be to actually take on an immortal god like Oshij. So, when he is at his cockiest, charmingest, best, let's say, that is the stage at which he suddenly runs into this entity. He does not know who he is. He does not know what he is. He has no idea of what that entity is capable of. So he starts in his usual way, and he thinks that, okay, I don't know who he is, what he is, but I'm sure I'll find my way around once we start. And suddenly he discovers that his entire, castle of identity seems to be made of sand. It just comes crumbling down, and this entity simply walks through him. And it's like nothing that Arihant can do, nothing that he thinks he's capable of is anywhere close to what this entity is doing to him. So it's like this guy who's suddenly, appeared out of nowhere. He's not just twice as good, thrice as good, or 100 times as good. He's 1,000,000 times as good. And Arihant is like left completely dazed. He's nearly killed in the encounter. And he is, he lives, he does not die, but it's not because of anything that he's done. It's just that for whatever reason, this entity suddenly changes his mind and just goes away. And when that happens, Arihant is like completely, his confidence is gone, he's completely shaken up, because growing up as he did, as the Devanam Priya, and capable of doing so many things which nobody around him seems to be able to do, he never grew up with the kind of experiences that all of us do, like, he doesn't know how to lose. It's as simple as that. So once this happens, he's like devastated, and he's convinced, I'm not the Devanam Priya, this is all just a legend woven around me, and I just want to, I've just been wasting my time, my life, whatever. And he's completely shaken up, loses his confidence, doesn't know what to do. And it is at that point of time that one of his gurus, in fact, the most influential, he has had 4 gurus, in fact, because that was to show the eclectic and very Catholic development that he goes through, which is not true for his counterpart on the dark side. So Arihant has had 4 gurus, 4 different gurus, and the idea was basically to show his very eclectic and very Catholic growth, let's say, which is not true for his counterpart on the dark side, who's had just a very linear kind of growth. She is, it's a woman on the other side, and she is, has her own power, but it is again, unlike Arihant, it's not been an inner unfolding. She's been gifted, granted, various capabilities and powers by the god she worships, which is Oshij. So now when Arihant hits this sort of roadblock in his growth path with this entity he meets, it is at that stage that one of his 4 gurus, who was essentially instrumental in Jal, to get him onto this whole path of the first breaking through, that is through the Kayakalp. So he has not been with Arihant for a long time because various things happened, and he could not stay with Arihant anymore. So at this point, when Arihant is at his worst, he is completely like devastated. That is the point when this guru of his, who is a Malang again, for Indians, what they are. And he is a very different character. He's not like the usual serious kind of gurus who will give you moral lectures and spiritual, roadways through which to travel. He is that, that very quirky, very humorous kind of a guy, sarcastic, who sort of, knows which buttons to push to get Arihant to move. So it is at this time that he comes back, and he tells Arihant that don't give up, because now that you know that you're not perfect, now you can actually move on and reach towards perfection. So Arihant, of course, is unwilling to believe anything at this moment. So he says, like what, I've been thrashed to within an inch of my life, what do you expect me to do now? And that is when the Malang tells him that there is a way, there is this this entity called the Oracle, and he is found on at a dimension which you cannot really find. It's somewhere there, but you don't know how to. But there is a gateway on earth through which you can reach him, and it is said that if you manage to reach the Oracle, then you can ask him for your heart's desire, and he never says no. So be very careful what you ask for, but you can ask for anything you want. You want a weapon to kill Oshij, you can ask for that. You want to ask for something else, you ask for that. So finally Arihant goes on that journey, and for him the journey itself is important, because it helps him to come to terms with a lot of issues that he has within himself, to realize what really drives him, and to be himself for that period when he's traveling. And when he reaches the Oracle, it's a very very strange experience for him, because this place is like a wormhole. He doesn't know where he is, which dimension he's on. And this Oracle comes across to him as an ancient figure, very wise ancient figure, huge, looking like some kind of a massive statue, that sort of a thing. And they have this very interesting conversation in the cave. At one point, Arihant decides he probably doesn't want to go through whatever the Oracle is capable of giving him, but he finds himself simply locked in. There's no way. It's a stone cave. Cave is probably not the right word. It's a huge space, so to say, but sort of enclosed by stone, and he can't get out. And the Oracle tells him, you either ask for what you want, or you just rot here. I don't care, one way or the other. So at that stage, when he's forced to that point, he suddenly realizes that he does not want to ask for a weapon to kill Oshij. What he really wants to know is who he is, because that's one question that has been riling him. So he asks that question, and from the answer that he gets and from the experience that he goes when he reaches that point, he emerges as a person who has basically no limitations anymore, because once you know who you are and you recognize your true self, all limitations drop away. So that's what happens to him. What he does not realize is that at the same time, the Oracle is also with the priestess of Oshij, who has been sent by her god to again ask for something, basically to ask for a weapon to kill her god's enemy. In fact, they've met outside the cave. They've also helped each other. They've sort of formed a kind of a bond which seems to be very deep, but at the same time Arihant is rather disturbed by it also. So both of them, when they enter this cave, there are two different routes, one going to the right and one going to the left, and they decide, they don't know where the oracle will meet them. So they decide to take the two different routes, and sort of, whoever finds the oracle will come back and tell the other, that kind of thing. But they don't realize that the oracle, being what he is, because he calls himself Kal, which is the timekeeper of the universe, being what he is, he meets both of them simultaneously, and they both have totally different experiences, the way they perceive the oracle, the way they interact with him. So while Arihant asks for who I am, the answer to his questions of identity, she asks for what her God wanted her to ask for, which is a weapon to kill the enemy, and both get what they want. And from there the story takes on a completely, a leap, both in time, in experience, in the kind of the level to which the story moves, and that is what leads to the rather tragic climax that happens at the end of this book, in which Arihant basically realizes that when he comes out of the cave, he is, as I said, he's dropped his limitations. He's a person who, when you look at him and when you read about what he can do, you say, okay, so what happened to him in Jal was just the first step. This is where he needed to be, and that's what he thinks, that this is where I needed to be. But then he realizes that he may be limitless himself, he may be invulnerable himself, but what about the people he loves? What about people around him? Just because you are limitless, you cannot make another person limitless. Just because you are invulnerable, you cannot make another person invulnerable. So that is the next lesson he learns, that this is not the end of the road. This is, in many ways, is just the beginning. And what do I do about those around me whom I love? And so that is where, from the tragedy that happens at the end of this book of Vikral, that is where Mahakal will start. And then Arihant has to learn how to transcend even limitlessness. So that's a concept which is, I think, very difficult for anyone to conceive. And well, we are working on it, trying to figure out how we are going to do it, but that is what Mahakal is going to be about. Because Arihant starts off as a precocious boy who has certain qualities, who he's born with certain abilities, which he's discovering as he goes along. And so because he's born as a human, because he grows up in a very loving family, which treats him as a regular child, and his gurus also do not really treat him as some kind of a strange phenomenon who they need to tiptoe around. So because of all these experiences, he the only thing, as I said, he never experiences is this the fact of defeat, because he's never been in a situation where somebody else has been able to best him. So he's like a very cocky young man who's very charming, who's very friendly, very warm, and inspires a lot of love and loyalty in people around him. And this is a quality which till the end of Mahakal, the end of Vikral, he still very much has. So he never really loses a sense of humor, he never loses a sense of perspective, he never loses the kind of equations and relationships that he has with people around him. Because he also knows that no matter what he may be, there are certain rules that govern the universe which he cannot really bend without turning entire creation upside down. So he never tries that. He might be able to do it, might not be able to do it, but he never really goes steps beyond certain ways of behavior that are, and he still has this kind of this human concern for what should be done rather than what can be done. So all these factors are there. So he is very human in the way he reacts, the way he responds. His abilities are a different thing, but the way he interacts with the world around him, the kind of concerns he has. Of course, he knows his ultimate task is to destroy a god, but that apart, the other things, other people in his life, other situations he goes through, they all sort of combine to make him into a character who comes across as not as a god, really. I mean, despite all his abilities, you can immediately connect with him. So that is something which through Jal and through Vikral is very much there, no matter what he does. It's only in Mahakal that, because of the tragic end to Vikral, suddenly he finds that himself bereft of what he regarded as, the good reasons for him to be around. So suddenly the positivity sort of gets sucked out of him, and there are no more fun and games. There's, he becomes a very different, basically a killing machine in Mahakal, till he rediscovers himself again. So that is why I said that he's very human in his perceptions, his reactions, his relationships. Yes, there are a lot of encounters which happen before he, in Mahakal, of course, he will encounter Oshij himself. But Oshij is a god, don't forget, and he is the lord of Maya. So before he was trapped into this prison of dreams, because the story is that, there were 4 gods, 4 major gods. We've, generally played around with the concept of the Trinity that you have in Hinduism. So instead of a trinity, we have a quartet, a divine quartet, which I call the Chaturanan, the 4 faces. And he is the god in the quartet who's been, so we've added this concept of a lord of Maya. So there is somebody who creates, somebody who destroys, somebody who preserves. But in addition to that, there is Oshij himself, who is responsible for maintaining the curtain of Maya, which keeps creation from merging back with, with the ultimate source. Because that's the only thing, once you recognize that you're a part of the divine spark, why would you want to stay on? So the whole game of, the universe, the manifest universe of the world is created and goes on just to keep the whole creation from merging back into the source. So he is the one who's responsible for doing that. And as you can imagine, who can be more deluded than the Lord of Maya himself? So at one stage he decides that, he wants, he thinks this is the ultimate, all the rest is rubbish, all the self-realization, etc., is all nonsense, because to preserve the creation and to keep the world going, that is his job, and that is the most important job of all of it. So that is how he sort of, gets trapped into this whole, into his own Maya in that sense. So he becomes sort of convinced that what he's doing, the aspect of creation that he rules over, is the most important. And this is how the whole cosmic war starts. His 3 siblings, 2 gods and 1 goddess, they are ranged against him. And there's this huge, massive cosmic battle which literally almost destroys the created world. So finally at the end of it, he cannot be defeated, because he's as infinite as his siblings, right? He has the same powers as them. So how do you, if you confront infinity with infinity, which one wins? So there is no way that his siblings can kill him or stop him. So the best they can do is they use his own Maya and they create a trap for him. And they sort of, he wanders into it thinking that, this is part of what I am. And then he discovers it was a trap, because his siblings have added their own powers to that, and it snaps around him and sort of, cages him. So he is asleep definitely, but before this happens, he knows that they are plotting something. He has heard rumors that they are trying to ask the cosmos to create an entity who would be like them but also different. So that is why the human angle, to Arihant, because if he was a god too, he would be the same as Oshij. But humans are capable of actually the kind of evolution that a god cannot undergo. So that is why they have asked for an entity, for a human being to be created who can actually take on Oshij and destroy him. So Oshij knows about that. So before he's trapped, he himself has been setting up these little traps for his enemy as and when he comes. So every time Arihant does something, or he discovers the next level of his powers, he sort of springs a trap. And that is when, like all kinds of things are thrown at him. There are, there are human serpents, there is a huge tiger that attacks him, a Maya created tiger. Then there are wolves, there are Danavas, there are all kinds of things which, attack him. Then there are these creatures called the white demons who, well, basically I based them on the Vikings, the same kind of looks and the same kind of. So they are half human, half demon, that kind of a thing. So there are a whole lot of these elements which he keeps encountering as he goes along. So that interest of the action part of it is sustained like that. So Oshit himself is not there, but his minions are there, his creatures are there, his avatars are there, his various things are there. So every step that Arihant takes, he springs a trap and something, he comes across something. So in a way it also helps him rebuild his own powers, because at every step he has to take on something new, something different. Realizes not just his limitations and how to get around them, but also a way to sort of subsume these manifestations of Oshij and move to the next level. Definitely had to look up some books, mostly suggested by my husband, who, as I said, he's deeply interested in all this. So because you know about these concepts in a kind of a story kind of sense, because you've heard all these mythological tales and these things can happen or can be done, and you have a vague idea of the spiritual legacies that we have in India. But to be able to actually use them in a sustained kind of way through a story, and to know exactly what happens when something like this comes into being, that is something that you probably have to read a bit about, because just the process of how to go about doing something like that, or to get the basic concept right. You cannot write something which can be challenged by oh, but this is absolutely nonsense. So I didn't want to do that. So that way I would say that this book is something that even somebody who's pretty well versed with our spiritual traditions or mystic traditions would not really be able to latch on to something and say that, oh, this is nonsense, this can't happen. This is all these things, all the concepts have actually come from things which have been probably written in our scriptures, in our other spiritual writings, and they of course have taken artistic license from time to time. Like as I said, the siddhis, the 8 siddhis which are there, I've taken the basic ideas but given them a slight twist. I call them by a different name, and like the Kaya Kalp, I said, it's nothing as dramatic and as intense as what the way we have portrayed it in Jal, but it's the basic concept is there. So that way. I wish I could tell you that. I've started writing it, but I guess this one, Mahakal, as I said, Jal took me a long time. It took me about 6 years off and on, but Mahakal took me Vikral took me much less. It took me about a couple of years. So I'm hoping that Mahakal would also take me no longer than that, but you never know. That depends again on very much on how much time I get, because now that I'm coming back to Delhi, the work pressures will also have to be taken into consideration. But still I'm hoping that within a couple of years we should have the next one out. I've already written the first 35-40 pages, so let's see how it goes.